We're departing a bit from our usual procedure today in that I will not be introducing our speaker. Instead, that honor goes to a supporter of the arts who I am confident would be prominent in the Portland arts community even if he weren't on the Portland City Council. And I'm speaking, of course, of the person seated to my right at the head table today. Here to introduce today's speaker, Portland City Commissioner Mike Lindberg.
Thank you very much, Jim. Introducing Bill Strickland is something that I do with wonder and something I do with goosebumps. He's done so much that he makes you feel like you'd have to give up sleeping during your life to accomplish half as much. Mr. Strickland is a pilot with thousands of hours of flying time. This morning he spent a couple hours with a group of community leaders, and I know he took us all above 40,000 feet in terms of imagination, inspiration, passion, and commitment. He has served on a host of prestigious national boards and commissions on business development and the arts. He's a trustee of the Carnegie Institute, a council member of the National Endowment for the Arts. And he's also managed to find time to create the Bidwell Training Center, where he trains our youth and gets them into the workforce with family wage skills. The Bidwell Center is just one of a few major capital and community empowering projects that he's bringing to life in Pittsburgh. Given that kind of schedule, I want to express our gratitude that he's taken the time to be here, particularly at a time when our community is trying to reach consensus on Arts Plan 2000 Plus, and also really define our goals in arts education. Today, I hope Mr. Strickland will share with us some of his vision and energy in respect to the power of the arts to transform individuals and entire communities. There is a reason why athletes and artists are the focus of children's attention. There is a reason why children take so much pride in that picture they want mommy and daddy to hang on the refrigerator. There's a reason that in gang-affected neighborhoods, there's rarely, if any, graffiti on culturally relevant murals. And there's a reason that the frustrations of inner-city youth come out in the mouths of rap artists as well as the barrels of guns. The arts have a unique power to reach into the hearts of our children, and artists give voice to the voiceless and speak to ears closed to other forms of communication. And with that, it's a great pleasure to turn the microphone over to our guest, a man who I found out this morning spent 15 minutes alone with George Bush to tell him the truth about what works in our country and what isn't working. I introduce Bill Strickland.
The most important parts of this are going to be the technology of getting the slide projector working and getting this microphone to adjust to my height. So let's do the basics first, and then we'll start talking a little bit. Does that come off? Yes. This was designed by somebody 5'8". All right, there we go. Okay. And the slide projector will work how? How's that work? I got a remote. I flew 727s. Forward. All right. Forward. It's nice to be here with you all today. I'm going to tell you a story about what I do for a living that has a variety of different looks and a variety of different feelings that all have to do with people. Aside from the things that I was described as having done to get this far in life, what was not part of the description was how I started doing all this stuff. And I've found that the most effective way to present my story to the public is to tell you the truth. In regular old English, hopefully that everybody can understand. And so far it's worked out pretty good. And the beginning of this straight-ahead life story or experience of mine is I was, believe it or not, in spite of my outfit today, a ceramic artist in the 60s. And I fell in love with clay as an artistic medium. And the way I fell in love with clay was that I had a teacher in a public high school, a fellow named Frank Ross, this Italian, teaching in a black public school in the middle of Pittsburgh during the riots. That's what they were. Nowadays we call them the disturbances. But back then we called them what they were, which were riots. And this fellow was making a pot one day as I was walking down the hall of this public school, and it caught it out of the side of my eye. And I can tell you all from the City Club today in Portland that I had never seen anything like that in my life. It was one of those experiences that you have sometimes in life where you know something significant has happened to you, but that you don't know what it is exactly. And I saw, as this child in this public school, this man create this piece of pottery out of clay, and it transformed my perceptions and understanding of reality itself. And I decided right there on the spot that I wanted to do that, whatever it was. And I cut all my classes for the next 2 years in this public school and learned this craft. I graduated, and as the result of my very strenuous encouragement on the part of this Italian pottery teacher of mine, I went to undergraduate school and survived that experience too. But what you need to know is that I was one of these children, not unlike a whole lot of children, who really was not very focused in on living in a successful way. And that the experience of this art teacher and this creative activity that happened changed my perceptions of reality itself, for real. And I went on to graduate school, and I learned about history and all of that stuff. And I founded this arts program specifically to replicate my own experience with children. It's autobiographical in that regard. And it's not based on art theory, it's based on art experience that I know about personally. The other thing I can tell you is that back in the 60s, anybody that tied a rag around their head and stood on the corner got some money for something. And I just happened to be one of those people. And it was very interesting sociology back then because the Black Panthers were in Pittsburgh and they had their thing. And I was on the other corner with my potter's wheel and my tent ministry. And my thing was to take black kids and make them into ceramic artists. That was my program. And I figured at that time that I could make all these children middle class, upwardly mobile, and sensitive consumers of the arts. And that was my principal and only responsibility in this world to do. And it made about as much sense then as it does now, but it made as much sense then relative to the Black Panthers as it did now. And I got a whole lot of kids through undergraduate school as the result of that very modest experience. It did happen. But something else happened during that time. I was asked to take over a place called the Bidwell Training Center. You all are old enough to remember the war on poverty. Those days. That's the period of time when we decided we were going to eliminate poverty in this country overnight. And we didn't do that, by the way. At least not yet. And one of the programs in Pittsburgh that was developed to eliminate poverty was a place called the Bidwell Cultural and Training Center, which was in my neighborhood where I was running my little pottery program. And it was a textbook war on poverty program, meaning that it was poorly managed. It ended up doing more harm than good for poor people. And I was asked to interview to take over the responsibilities for this distinguished institution on the street corner during the riots by the board. And my principal qualification, I'm told after I was selected, that unlike my predecessors, it was rumored that I had paid my income tax, which turned out to be true. My first day on the job at the Bidwell Cultural and Training Center in 1972, do y'all remember the movie Blackboard Jungle? Yeah, that's where I was working. That's what it looked like. As I walked down the hall in my only Brooks Brothers suit, they were literally gambling that I would not last a day. It was an interesting introduction to this poverty program. The other person that visited me that day was a fellow with a big gold badge, and he was from the Internal Revenue Service. And he said, "We understand you're the new executive director of this school, and you owe us $350,000. I said, "That's an interesting opportunity to demonstrate my managerial prowess. How do you propose that we pay you back?" He said, "That's not my problem, that's your problem." Well, we did. And what happened was that the administration of the school had taken the withholding money from the staff and never paid it. And that was my first day on the job, having never run anything except an arts program that was set up to make black kids middle class. But what you're going to see for the next few minutes is the results 20-some years later of what happened in this school. That's why it's important that I introduce the school in the way I just did. Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense to you. Now, the school today is an interesting place. It works with people from the Western Pennsylvania community. Half my students on the vocational side, this little brochure up here, are ex-steel workers. You remember them? Once upon a time, Pittsburgh was a heavy industrial city. It isn't anymore. The only mills that are in Pittsburgh are museums. But the steel workers, by the way, still exist, and they have largely been forgotten. All 80,000 of them. I retrain a couple hundred of them a year. And the sociology of Joe Sadowski, who's a third-generation Eastern European coming to a black-run school in the middle of the inner city to get retraining, is interesting sociology, I assure you. And Joe Sadowski's not coming to my school in the middle of the inner city for retraining because he's become a liberal overnight. He's coming there because he's heard rumors that we can do him some good and get him a job and rebuild his life. So half my students in this Bidwell Training Center are white ex-steel workers who are getting retrained for a new life in a black-run school in the middle of an industrial park in a black neighborhood. The other half of my constituency are single parents and welfare mothers, second and third generation. They're there too, and black males. So I'm going to take you through some slides on this place because I want you to see it. It's a pretty building. Now, I don't have slides of where I used to live because you would not have liked it very much. But now we got this old fancy building. I like to drag it around the countryside and brag about it. The other thing you need to know in that connection, however, is that this building didn't get there by accident. It got there by choice. My choice. There is nothing in this facility that was built without a purpose. And the purpose, folks, straight up, is this. I am convinced that this country is in very, big trouble. I think our educational system has collapsed. I don't think it's collapsing. I think that the economy isn't going to make it. And if we don't do some very serious things very quickly, we're going to lose it. So I just want to let you know where I'm coming from right off the bat, so that nobody's confused as to why I built this thing. Now, I'm convinced that Joe Sadowski, the ex-steelworker, and Miss Jones, the welfare mother, are hurt people. I think they're very disappointed, and they're very bitter, and they're very lonely. And that the only way that you can turn them around and get them reinvested in life again is to reinvest them in life. And the only way you can really effectively do that is to do it dramatically, is my belief. So I built this school that we've been in for 4 years. And it's 62,500 square feet of elegant space down by the riverside in Pittsburgh. And I put a fountain out there because I like fountains. And I like water. And I thought that Joe Sadowski and Miss Jones ought to go to a school that had a running fountain that'd be good for their spirits and their heads. So I put it there. And every summer, and every fall, and every spring, we make sure that it's loaded with flowers for these students to see. You ever heard of Frank Lloyd Wright? Any of you heard of him? He was an architect. He's a very important part of this story that you must understand. The fellow who built this building is a Greek named Tasso Katselis, who's big time. He's a friend of mine. And I found him a couple years ago, not in the Yellow Pages. I found him because back in high school, I was asked by my art teacher to do a project. So I evaluated architecture. And one of the buildings I evaluated was a monastery done by some fellow named Tasso Katselis, who I at the time did not know. And I recorded it. And when I raised this money for this building, I went back to that monastery and I found out where the guy's office was. And I walked in his office and said, Mr. Katselis, you don't know me from anybody, but I got some money. I want to build a building. I want you to build it. And he said, why? I said, because I like what you're doing with light and with sunshine and with cantilevered space, and I have seen you before. He said, where have you seen me before? I said, I was reading a book on a man named Frank Lloyd Wright. He was an architect. Wonderful man. I was turned on by his architecture. He said, in other words, you see some similarity between he and I. And I said, yes, sir, I think I do. And I want that spirit in this facility that I'm going to build for these steel workers and these black folks. He said, that makes some sense to me. I said, why? He said, come behind my desk. I walked behind the desk, and there's a picture of Tasso with Frank Lloyd Wright. He was one of Mr. Wright's students. Now, what you must understand is another part of the story. The way I found about Mr. Wright was this art teacher who taught me pottery took me to see one of Mr. Wright's buildings when I was 16 years old. And I said, my God, there may come a time in my life when I can introduce the idea of this sunlight and this architecture in a school. So Mr. Wright and Tasso and this building are all tied together in a straight line umbilical cord. We have a full-blown culinary arts training program in the Bidwell Training Center. Do you all eat Heinz ketchup out here? If you don't, start. and eat lots of it, and I'll tell you why. It's okay. It's fine. The reason I'm encouraging you to eat, I'm all for Campbell's ketchup too, and Hunt, but I'm particularly fond of Heinz ketchup because the plant, the main plant for Heinz is in Pittsburgh, and it's about 2 miles from my building. But that in and of itself is not important. What is important is that during the course of the capital campaign to build this building, I was summoned to the 39th floor of Mr. Heinz's office. And he said, you know, son, I've heard all about you, and you're doing wonderful things for steel workers and for black people. And I understand you're doing some stuff in the arts that's exciting, and you got vocational education, and we're ashamed to say that we have not done nearly enough to get black people into the food industry. And before I depart this life, I would like you to help me to solve at least part of that agenda with your new building. Would you be willing to consider that as a part of the structure of your space? I said, yes, sir, I certainly would be willing to do that. He said, well, how quickly do you think you could implement a program to introduce a culinary arts training program into your school? I said, I'm sure that based on logistics and planning, it would not be very long. He said, well, my foundation is scheduled to meet next week to consider $1 million grant to you, and I would love to be able to say that we've implemented this program. I said, sir, it will be implemented this afternoon. And Mr. Heinz and his family made $1 million gift for this building. But he did 2 other things that were very important that you must understand. He said, you know, I think that you're doing a wonderful thing down there, and I'm going to loan you the head of research for the Heinz Company, the Heinz Corporation, and he's going to help develop a curriculum for you. And he did, and he's still with us, Byron Barty. He's one of 5 five-star chefs in the world, Ferdinand Metz, Paul Prudhomme, and there are 2 others. He wrote a curriculum for our school, not to teach chefs, but to train all the support people in the food industry. And every student who goes through, Joe Sadowski and Miss Jones, who are taught to prepare and present gourmet food, get a job in the industry as the result of the Heinz interest in what we do. Everybody gets a job. And that's why we built a gourmet kitchen, including an amphitheater, in this space. And our students are taught in this amphitheater, which is state-of-the-art, everything you could imagine, to do it right. But the other thing that grew out of it is that when you teach cooking, you make food, obviously. And we make brilliant trout almondine and wonderful strawberries flambé and all these wonderful, wonderful things. So I decided to institute a lunch program at my school. It would be unconscionable to throw away this food. And I think that the sociology of having Joe Sadowski eating trout almondine for lunch followed by strawberries flambé for dessert is a good story for his head, in addition to his stomach. And that's what we do at my school. But as the result of doing these wonderful presentations for these poor people, which is what they are, some of my corporate people who I was dragging up and down the hallways of this building got very excited about our food and said, have you ever considered, Mr. Strickland, catered events? I said, you know, I hadn't actually thought about that. I was so intent on setting up the training program and getting that going, we hadn't thought about it. And one of these guys said, well, you know what? My wife's 50th wedding anniversary is coming up in 3 weeks, and it would be a great community story and a great story for me if we could have your students do this wonderful, elegant food in celebration of our 50th wedding anniversary, etc., which we did. And we made a couple bucks doing it. And we put some people to work, and it was very exciting. That was 3 years ago. We did $400,000 in catered events last year without a marketing piece. Now I want you to hold on to that fact, because it'll become very clear to you in about 20 minutes why that's important. We also happen to be the only school in Pennsylvania with a liquor license. I won't bore you with how we did that, but you can have a very dry martini on the property, and it's completely legal. This is a setup for a black tie. We do black tie functions there all the time, upscale. We now do all the functions for the opera, the Mellon Jazz Festival, IBM, AT&T, the Port Authority, and so on. They use us all the time. But that's not the whole piece, as you'll see in a second. We also teach people how to read at this place. There are 50,000 people that we know about in Allegheny County, surrounding Pittsburgh, that can't read C-Spot Run. And I have a program set up with IBM to teach people to read for the first time in their life. It's a computerized adult literacy program. It's interactive, it's high-tech, augmented by classroom instruction, and in 20 weeks, we can get people 5 grade levels, demonstrated and proven with this interactive system. The problem is that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, in its enormous vision of what people need, hasn't figured out any funding mechanism to allow us to get them from grade 5 to grade 12. So I can only take them to grade 5. Then the funding stops. In other words, I can get people to the point where they can begin to read a menu, but they can't afford to eat what's on it because they don't have a job, because they haven't got a high school diploma yet. So when the state comes to its senses and sees that it's more cost effective to get these people secondary education, then we'll do it. And we know how to do it, big time. You will not see a sign on the IBM facility that says this is where the illiterates are. They look just like computer operators that are part of the IBM system that's in our facility, and they are. We also have a medical technology training program. You know how I got that? I went around to every hospital in Western Pennsylvania and I said, you got a lousy affirmative action program and don't lie. What we need to do is to tell the truth for a change. And I started at the president's level and worked my way down. I said, I know you, Joe, and your hospital don't have any black people in it except as patients. And we got to change this thing, man. But we're going to do it the right way this time. He said, what's the right way? I said, we're going to enter into a partnership, you and me, your hospital and my little fancy training center, and we're going to customize a curriculum specific to what you need. I want you to loan me your head pharmacist for 60 days, and he and I are going to get out legal pads and pencils and coffee, and we're going to write a curriculum. And guess what? We're going to teach people that curriculum. And we're going to front-end load this thing so that you are a part of the selection process. And we did 2 years ago. And every pharmacy technician who has come through this place has gone to work in the industry, folks. Most of them are black people. And they're now working for the thrift drug pharmaceutical chain in all the hospitals in Western Pennsylvania. And guess what? The hospital has solved its affirmative action program the right way, at least in terms of pharmacy. And people said, my God, Mr. Strickland, you are a great revolutionary educator. I said, what brought you to that conclusion? He said, you've helped us solve our affirmative action problem. I said, don't you understand that the answers are inside your own head? That's my contribution to this whole process, is to introduce common sense. Of course it's mythology that black people can't be technicians. And of course it's mythology that you can't hire them. And that's my whole civil rights speech right there. So let's take this show on the road, shall we? And we have. Now we train exclusively for Blue Cross, Blue Shield. All their medical claims processors come from my school. We have a chemical lab technician training program with MoBay and Alcoa and Westinghouse and PPG. It's the first of its kind that has happened. And you know what's so crazy about this thing? I am not a community college. I am not a university, and I am not a poverty program. I'm just a school. And all of a sudden, we're taking ex-steel workers and black folks and single parents and doing advanced technology training in a community-based facility successfully. We have 100% placement rates with these programs. And we've got a couple $1 million worth of fancy IBM computers, and I have a full-time systems engineer who's assigned to me, so as the technology improves, we improve too, right? And everybody's thinking that we're walking on water, and actually we're walking on land. But Joe Sadowski's working and doing a super job, by the way, and so is Miss Jones. This you will not see often in this country because there aren't very many of them. I created with IBM something called a computer repair training program. All $500,000 of it sitting there. And what IBM did is they flew up a technician from Atlanta, and he was on my staff for 1 year. And he and I wrote a curriculum to teach people how to repair and refurbish IBM computers successfully. Same bunch, steel workers and minorities and so on. And IBM came up a year later with a team of dark-suited men with charts. They were the evaluation team from IBM. They wanted to evaluate how this thing was doing. And you know what they concluded? Our people were 3 to 5 times more proficient than their own technicians. For real. And they were mystified as to why, or how could that be? I said, the answer is in front of your face. We taught the students only what they needed to know. And we operated on the assumption that they could do the work. And they did. This is a little closer to where some of you may live. This is the arts program that I'm involved with. This is where I started in the 60s. I lived upstairs in the sleeping bag, and the program was downstairs on the first floor, and that was my vision of how you run things. I have improved a little bit in that regard as I get older. I don't have the sleeping bag anymore. We run a public school-based, community-based training program for at-risk kids. I didn't know they were at risk till somebody told me that they defined what at-risk was. That's the latest thing for kids who are not doing well in school. We're now calling them at-risk. And these at-risk children are bused to my facility for discipline-specific training in the arts every day. This is not art to help you feel better or to have a nice day. That is not the objective of the program. The objective of the program is to put children in a discipline-specific environment with the arts as the tool to see what happens to them. Well, what is happening to them is I got a whole bunch of them into undergraduate school as the result of this thing. Like 85% each year for the last 3 years. Now you have to understand, these are kids who are flunking out of school when we start with them in 9th and 10th grade. 2.5 years later, 85% of them are in college. Why? The arts is why. That's why. What has happened to these children is that they have decided to be excited about life. That's what clay and photography and jazz can do for you if it's applied in a rigorous environment. We got kids in undergraduate school and they're not flunking out. Black kids and white kids. And let me tell you something about the Bill Strickland School of Race Relations. you take the white children who come to our program and you take the black children who come to our program and you put them in a photography lab and you turn out the light, and guess what? They all have the same lousy attitude, poor self-image, and bad manners. Every one of them. And every one of them responds to this program. For real. And now I got a study to prove it. This isn't just Bill Strickland talk. I got a 67-page double-spaced study with bar graphs and pie charts and all these measurement tools that make educators feel comfortable to back up my story and my claims. That was provided by the public school system itself and the University of Pittsburgh. I called in my own evaluators and said, don't take my word for it, you study the kids, which they did for 6 months quite rigorously. And you know what they concluded 67 pages later? Is the guy's right. That's what it basically said, but it said two other things that are very important to know in the 67 pages. They asked the children, why do you come to this place? And they said, because we love the school. And they asked them, of all the people in your adult life that have been most influential in determining why you went to undergraduate school, who was it? And they said, the teachers at the Manchester Craftsman's Guild Arts program and the facilities that we are taught in and the food that they serve us when we go there. And who was the least influential? Their guidance counselors in school. Not one kid out of the whole study said that a counselor in school would influence them to make any decisions in their life regarding undergraduate school. For real. Now hold up, folks. You got to understand that there are good people in the public schools, but the system itself has gotten out of hand. That's what the real deal is. And in effect, what I've decided to do is run a private school for poor people in terms of how I think about them. And that's why the children come to the school. They are required to learn ceramics and photography, and they play jazz brilliantly. I do not accept mediocre students in my school. They may think they are, but they aren't. There is no such thing as a mediocre student in our school. They start off on the assumption when they walk in the door that they're the best and they're the brightest. And guess what? They meet it. They meet the expectation. This is work that's being done by these at-risk kids who don't know anything, who are insensitive people. This boy's got a 4-year scholarship to Indiana University of Pennsylvania in Clay. He flung out of school 3 years ago. This is an interesting slide. This boy's name is Sharif Bey, B-E-Y. He was dyslexic, and we thought, and didn't talk to nobody. And he got on the school bus a couple years ago and came down to our program, and I just said, sit him in the corner and give him clay and leave him alone. As long as he keeps coming, we can afford the clay, big deal. Well, Sharif Bey has just interviewed with 6 colleges. And one of them is going to give him a 4-year ride in ceramics. And he's talking fine now. A couple years later. The boy just did a residency at Bennington College last summer on his own. And he's got a 4-year ride probably to the University of the Arts in Pennsylvania on merit. This is work that's being done by these kids. We have a fully equipped black and white and color facility. We do our own mounting, framing, and hanging right out of the place. We also got a deal going now with AGFA Film Corporation. They like us, and I like them. And every time they send me free film, I get to like them more. And I've decided to enter into a partnership with AGFA. As their technology improves, they're going to use us as a training site. So I can get all this fancy stuff in my photo facility so that when my kids make application to Rochester Institute of Technology, which they are, they're going to have a leg up on every freshman that's going in there. And by the way, gang, that's the secret to how you keep black kids in the college. Prepare them. That's why they'll stay, because they're good at what they do. So we got this thing all hooked up with Rochester Institute of Technology, and we're going to be very famous for sending all these kids to these fine schools. And I got them there now. I got a kid at MIT right now. At risk, flunking out of school. He's in architecture at MIT and doing fine. Now I want to systematize this thing. What does that mean? It means I want a system. I want to be able to say to an inner city kid, black kid, white kid, pink kid, you listen up, son, and you fly right, and I'll get you into undergraduate school in 3 years. Guaranteed. And so I've said to all the college presidents, I got this thing figured out, guys. You've got to enter into a partnership with me where you guarantee me 4 or 5 scholarships each college on the front end, and I'll deliver the product to the front door. Can't miss. And guess what? You're going to look famous and smarter than you are for doing it. And everybody wins, for Christ's sake. That's how you get it done. Now, what rules are there that say that you can't do that? I haven't read any. What's missing is the will to do it. For real. Or how did I get them kids into college? I have a bachelor's degree in history. I don't have a PhD in education. All the PhDs in education work for the school system. These 2 girls are going to a high university which has turned out more Pulitzer Prize winners in photojournalism than any school in the world. I've got 3 students. Do y'all have a governor's school for the arts out here? You know what that is? Some states have a governor's school for the arts. It's this real snooty deal that during the summertime all the brilliantly talented kids go to this school that's funded by the office of the governor of Pennsylvania, in theory, so they can broaden their experience and all of that. And it's a very prestigious deal, and it goes on for 8 weeks, and you get a little certificate, and it's a big deal in Pennsylvania. New York has one, and so on. Only 150 children are selected for this very prestigious institute sponsored by the governor each year. There must be at least 20,000 applications from across the state in the form of auditions that take place for 150 kids. Last year, 4 of them were ours. 4. This is work being done by the students. This girl's on her way to Slippery Rock University. She'll be fine now. This is work that is being done by insensitive kids who can't learn anything. Keep in mind, that's who we're talking about. At risk. I also built a music hall on this thing. I built a music hall on this building because I like jazz. And I had the money, and I went for it. And interestingly enough, if you ever watch Charles Kuralt, there's a fellow that comes on and does the jazz piece called Billy Taylor, Dr. Billy Taylor. He opened up the place, black tie. It was wonderful. Played this piano and so on. And then we closed it down. Why? Because I didn't have any staff to run it. And I didn't have any money to run it. I just built it. And then I lucked into a performing arts fellow who came by who played jazz, and he put a subscriber base together that'll knock your socks off, and he knew all the musicians and their private numbers and all that stuff, and we really got into it big time. And since then, we have had Ahmad Jamal come by, and Dizzy Gillespie come by, and Max Roach come by, and Dakota Staten, and Betty Carter. Joe Williams' trio was there 2 months ago. We have the Count Basie Orchestra scheduled for this spring. Herbie Mann will be there this Christmas. And as far into the future as you can see with this music, these people will come. To sold-out audiences in our little 350-seat music hall, which happens to be acoustically perfect, by the way, which was as much luck as planning, I assure you, but nevertheless it has happened. 60% of the people who come to this music hall are white people, not from the inner city. We can tell by, we have them fill out one of them little forms, and we know where they come from, what their income level is, and all that kind of stuff. 60% of the audience, 40% is black, and everybody's getting along fine. Because I insist that they do get along fine. We need to put this foolishness aside and enjoy the music. And that's why they come. We're sold out through next year. There isn't a ticket to be found. And the point of the story is that in this black-run school in the middle of an industrial park in the middle of the inner city on a Saturday night, it's sold out. And 60% of the people coming there are not from that neighborhood. And we make sure that as the receptions with the artists take place after the concerts, that our culinary people drag out the dead trout and the strawberries flambé. Because what we're selling is an attitude about life. And black people and white people in this building get along fine. We also have the most racially integrated school, probably in Pittsburgh at least, maybe in Pennsylvania. But I don't own a bus company. The school system owns a bus company. And it costs $23 million a year out of a $250 million budget to operate this bus company. The kids who come to my school get on a bus voluntarily with a bus pass to come to our place, the black kids and the white kids, and they get along fine. Voluntarily. And you know why? Because they like the school. And they like the food. And they like each other in this environment. And so the school system has asked me to provide them with an analysis of my desegregation plan. I said, the program is the plan. Don't you get it? I had a very interesting experience in this connection, folks. We built a recording studio into this hall, by the way. I have master tapes of every artist I've just told you about, and it'll make sense to you in about 5 minutes why I did that. That's Billy Taylor, just in case you thought I was lying. It was a wonderful evening. We had an ice sculpture, multiple entree presentation. So we made 20 grand, black tie. It was all right. I had an experience driving. My program is very close to the public school system. And I was driving down the street last year. And you know how you have an experience and you say, what's missing? And it was at the time when all the yellow school buses were discharging the kids in front of John Oliver High School, where I went to school. And I looked out the side of my eye, and I went on to work. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and I said, I understand now what's missing. And it bothered me all day. Nobody was carrying a book. I said, my God, what has happened to us? Maybe we've evolved to some new place where books are no longer required as a condition of learning. But I don't think so. They're required at my school. It's a nice room. Very intimate, very elegant. The jazz people love it. The opera people love it. The opera uses us now for all their many recitals. They love the place. They also love the dead trout. I built a recording studio into this thing. And I need a time check because I need to wrap it up. How much time? Okay. We'll wrap it up pretty quick, I think. I built a recording studio into this, and I got tapes of all this stuff. And it occurred to me that the future of nonprofits is going to have to not be dependent on the Oregon Commission for the Arts, because as much as they love you, they ain't got enough money to take you home any more than the local Arts Commission does. They're good people and they need to be there, but they can't get you home. The National Endowment can't get you home. They ain't got any money either. But they need to be there, and we need to continue to support them aggressively. This 2000 initiative y'all got up here is out of sight. I love it. It's gonna work in time. But I've got tapes, all this stuff, right? National treasure time. And why is that important? What's important is that CBS Records and I are talking to each other about making albums of this stuff and paying the artists the royalties that they deserve, and the income comes back to support the school. That's Dizzy. He was there. Good guy. That's the gallery where the students exhibit professionally, twice a year, catered by our culinary people. I have a Japanese cabinet maker who works for me. I commissioned him to do 60 pieces of furniture for this building, of which that boardroom table was one example. He's now off in his own business, doing all right. I wanted Joe Sadowski and Miss Jones to come to a school where there was Japanese-made furniture for them to see and to feel. You understand? And to eat food that made some sense for a change, and to go to a classroom where the teachers knew what they were talking about. This is a business incubator space that we're doing now also. It's right next to the Heinz plant. And the minute I signed for the paper, and what's going to be in there? Women-owned and black-owned technology-driven businesses. That's what's going to be in there. And I have a business industrial development corporation that's going to take these people to market. And guess whose people they're going to hire for their companies? Mine. You get it? You close the circle again. We generate the businesses, we train the students, and everybody wins. Come on, right? By the day we signed for this building, by the way, the Heinz plant, which is a half-mile away, announced a $100 million expansion plan over the next 5 years. You know what happened to the appreciation on that building? And as importantly, what you need to know is that the training center, Bidwell in Manchester, own the building. So in terms of an endowment for its future, yeah. 2 more slides and I'll let you go. This happens to be the Science Center. That's a quarter of a mile from my building. You remember that Greek architect I was telling you about earlier? The student of Frank Lloyd Wright, who built my pretty building, and who I've made more famous than he already was? He built this Science Center. All $42 million worth. That's a quarter of a mile from, it's an Omnimax theater, and it's everything that's anything. And he and I have remained good friends. And I called him up about a year ago and said, you know, Tasso, I drove by and saw that pretty fancy Science Center down there, and I was just wondering, who's going to run the food operation? And he said, you're right, you are. And when you think about it, it all makes sense. Black-run school working with ex-steel workers, culinary training program, Heinz Corporation, good story, clean cut, makes sense. Revenue comes back to support the school, know how to do gourmet food, everybody wins. If that's not good politics, and if that's not good community economic development, what is? Well, we signed the contract, gang. Multi-year. 3 years guaranteed, 2 one-year renewables. And you know what? The most important part of the story is we opened this thing up September this year. We did a wonderful job. We fed 2,500 people, black tie, 4 levels of this thing in 90 minutes, and didn't miss a beat. Joe Sadowski and Miss Jones did a good job. But as importantly, after expenses, we made $50,000 the first month. We're going to make $750,000 after-tax profit first year. I'm going to be able to eliminate the debt from my arts program and my training center the first year. And where's my endowment for my staff going to come from? And where's my increases in salaries going to come from? It's going to come from earnings, for Christ's sake. That's where it's going to come from, so I can close the circle. And that the arts program will be endowed, hopefully, if I can make it, for the rest of its life. If y'all ever come to Pittsburgh, I'm a trustee of this place. I'll take you through. It won't cost you nothing. This is another project. This is a $400 million development that's just about to go in Pittsburgh. We're going to run the health club, food, and a 5-star restaurant in the middle of this thing with our training center people. The other thing we're going to do is serve all the construction workers. I didn't realize how much money there is to be made serving coffee to construction workers. I want to tell you. We're projecting a $2 million gross receipts over the period of construction, just setting up a trailer and selling coffee and elegant Danish done by my culinary people to these fellas. We're going to do all right. This is the last slide. This happens to be a slide that didn't exist 2 years ago. It is a slide of the $750 million Greater Pittsburgh International Airport that it will open October 1st, 1992. It's a wonderful slide. It also happens to be an airport that will you can put O'Hara and Atlanta International Airport together on the site of this thing. It's a city is what it is. And I had a chance to see it, and my visions of Frank Lloyd Wright came back to me when I was touring this thing. And you know why? Because that Greek architect is building it. Tasso Katselis is the architect who built the Science Center and my building. And I called up Tasso Katselis after my tour. And I said, Tasso, who's doing the food? We're now negotiating with the British Airport Authority that's been hired to lease the spaces out to run the employee food services area for the whole thing. And we're close to home. We'll make it. What is the point? There are 2 points, 3 points. One, I believe that the arts can change us. I believe it, for real. It's the lifeline. 2, that in the course of our lives, it is our responsibility to do right and to make this country be what it can be, I believe. And it hasn't been doing that lately. And the people who know it are the Japanese. You know, we blew up their country 40 years ago, 50 years ago. We did. And 45% of the cars that we're driving are made there now, because they decided that they were going to have a war for peace. And they're going to rebuild their country. And I'm telling you, in Portland, we got to do this thing. We got to rebuild the country on the truth this time. And it can be done. We're smart enough. The third thing is that once upon a time there was this black kid walking down the corridors of a public school who saw an Italian pottery teacher make a pot, and it transformed the way that he saw reality. And as the result of that enormously powerful experience, he went on to change the lives of many, many people. And I'm telling you that that is not a unique experience to me. It can be a unique experience to all of us if we'll just do it. And if you do, it will have made my coming to be with you very memorable. Thank you.